All right, we're with Kelly Quinlan today, Tide Illustrated site publisher. Kelly, thanks for coming on. You ready to talk some Alabama football today?
Absolutely.
Awesome. All right, so let's get down to it. So right away, something that I know the fans there on your site love to talk about, and that are any players that are currently verbally committed to the class. Do you see them moving up into the five-star ranks?
I mean, I think Caleb Downs is a five-star guy. You know, I think that he's proven sort of his value. He's really one of the more versatile guys in the 2023 class. He's right on the edge. I think if we're once we get to our normal number of five-star guys, I think we're at 20 right now. Maybe we get into being at 30, 31, 32. I think three of the current commits probably jump into that, and then they have chance to obviously add to that as well. But Downs is the one to me that's sort of the most obvious and the one that angers the Alabama fans the most. Which I get, like, you want your guys as high as possible. The counterpoint I've always been kind of bringing up with this is we have more guys in our 250, more guys rated higher. Just in general, it's just at the very top end, there's maybe a 10 spot difference between where we have Caleb and some other people do. And I think he'll get there. He obviously started the season really strong last week. So to me, he's definitely a guy. And then Justice Haynes is just a really dynamic running back. I think he's a guy that's a five-star guy too, that will be when it's all said and done. And even a guy like Richard Young has a chance to, just to jump in there. He's right on that edge too. He's down near your backyard, and he's a guy that I think is pretty dynamic as well. And probably right on that edge. It'll probably depend as well with maybe Richard, how other guys do in the class, and that bottom part of the five-star thing, whether he can maybe move up or move down.
Yeah, I agree. Caleb Downs, Justice Haynes, two guys out of Georgia. I don't know when the last time Georgia didn't have a five-star in a recruiting class. If Justice does anything close to what he's done the last 3 years, even if it's not like a 2,000-yard season, even though he is playing for Buford, it's almost kind of a career five-star honor for what he's done. I think Jalil Hurley and Tony Mitchell are two guys that will be in that conversation, as well as possible guys to move up into that ranks, and it all depend on their senior year. So next one, we're sticking with five stars here. So there's 8 of them, Kelly, 8 5-stars that are uncommitted right now. Not talking about flipping guys, but which 8? So we got Salmon Pimba, Kamani McLean, Nicole Harbor, TJ Shannon Jr., David Hicks Jr., Samson Okanola. I always kind of get tongue-tied on that one. Keon Keeley and Javan Tovano. So which of those guys, which of the 8 do you see Alabama going after really hard, and how do you feel about their chances with any of those guys?
I mean, I think they'll get Keon Keeley from Berkeley Prep. I think the wisdom has been really since he took the visit, and then decommitted from Notre Dame now, that even before that happened, I think a lot of people thought that was going to happen. I think that one's sort of the most inevitable one at this point. Talking about the corners, that's where it gets interesting with Cormani and the kid from Texas, Tovano. Those guys, yeah, they want one more corner, right? So is it one of those two guys? Do they flip the Dennison kid? Like, it's going to be interesting to see what they do there, because they're going to take another DB, more of a corner type DB. And I think that those are the two spots. I don't know that they'll take another offensive lineman right now. They have 5 in the class right now. I'm sure they would like to have more, because they're rebuilding that offensive line room after it was, not as productive as they would like last year with Doug Marrone, and they have a new Eric Wolford coaching now, the O-line, and they're trying to rebuild that. So maybe they do go to 6, but at some point I think they're going to get tight on numbers too, because you're at 21 commits now. I have them maybe taking 7 more guys out of high school if possible, if they get everyone they want. So you start to get a numbers crunch at that point. I just wonder if they would go to the 6 OL. But again, attrition, all those things factor in all this stuff. And at this point, we can't really know where that's at. Guys having great seasons, going pro early. There's so many dominoes that, especially with offensive linemen, that's the position in college football where you have the greatest amount of attrition year to year, where you'll see guys just medical randomly or quit or decide to stop playing football or any number of things. So that could change the math there a little bit too. But I think when some teams see this version of the Alabama offense, kind of what I'm hearing from what's going on there, I think that's going to also be an enticing thing for offensive linemen that maybe weren't as high on them in the past, that just didn't see maybe the fit with Marone and what they were doing, and like what the adjustments they've made and how dynamic and different the offense is, because I think they're going to be really dominant running the football, and obviously they have the best quarterback in college football too. So the passing game is going to be on point, and I think that's going to be enticing for some offensive linemen to come play in that.
So you kind of answered my next question a little bit about how many more high school players do you think Alabama is going to take in this class? And you also kind of already answered the second part of that. And it's too soon to tell, but maybe kind of get the magic 8 ball or the crystal ball out and forecast the future. Do you think that Alabama will hold a few scholarships for the transfer portal? I know they've kind of reluctantly gone into it, but they've been successful so far when they have. Do you think that maybe they may hold out and take 5 or so transfer portal players, or how do you see that working into the way Alabama recruits in the future?
So I think they have 14 guys that are what you would call seniors, and then you obviously there you have a big group of junior guys like Jahmyr Gibbs that'll go pro. So that's where I think the math comes into for the portal more than anything to me, is the guys that leave via attrition. And it's probably, I would imagine that Nick Saban, like in the last cycle, it's 3 or 4 guys you're going to target at key spots where you can make an immediate upgrade, right? Like Jahmyr Gibbs gave you a dynamic kick returner and punt returner. Jermaine Burton was a real value pickup at wide receiver where you needed some experience and a guy that was underused probably in his system at Georgia. Those are the type of guys they're gonna be looking at. What are those positions? It's hard to tell right now because you have to factor into, like, God forbid somebody gets hurt or whatever and they come back. So I think there's sort of a math equation. That's the toughest thing from talking to coaches across college football these days, is just trying to figure out that math equation of how many portal spots do I take? How many high school kids? Alabama likes to develop their own product. And Coach Saban likes to develop his guys over time. So he's less in favor of the portal than, Lane Kiffin at Ole Miss, where that's a little bit like it used to be with JUCOs, right? Like where you could go and add all these JUCO kids. So it just depends on your approach. Saban likes to build organically from within his own program, Coach Saban. So I think they're going to be very targeted in what they add. It's going to be a couple of guys, to me, I think that's the right approach if you're in Alabama. Clemson is another team that's sort of done that as well, but they haven't actually filled their holes as much. So that's sort of interesting. I like the approach that Alabama's taken more with it, where, hey, this is the couple of guys that could really change things for us. Let's go get them in the portal, and then let's build up our own guys now organically to have a sustainable program. And that's the thing that's been the big key to Alabama's success, is it's been, you called last year a rebuilding year, right? And they got, as far as you can get without winning a national title. That's the expectation there. It's because they build from within organically versus just taking a free agency approach, for lack of a better term, with the portal. And I think you're going to see that kind of play out here over college football over the next few years, that the teams that have a strong organic structure, that have NIL where they're developing players and rewarding the players that develop in their system versus going out and maybe trying to procure players via NIL money. I think those are the programs that are going to have the sustained success versus people trying to be, for lack of a better term, the Yankees or the Cowboys or whatever sports team that goes and spends a lot of money on free agency. I don't know. In football, such a team dynamic and the elements that you need to have a successful program, it's hard to build in a non-organic manner, in my opinion. But maybe we'll see somebody buck that trend, like I just don't see it right now in college football. So I think what Coach Saban's doing with Alabama makes a lot of sense to me, and I think that's why his program's been successful. It's why he'll keep coaching. I don't get the vibe from having heard him talk about this that he's super excited about having a different group of guys every year that he's constantly bringing in either and having this churn that other schools have.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think a lot of fans don't maybe fully understand what it's like to have an offensive line group that's been together for 3 years or even 2 years, where they know what the other guy is doing, what they're thinking, and how different plays are going to go ahead of time, especially for the continuity in a passing attack where if you know a receiver is going to round out, a 15-yard or 10-yard out or whatever the case may be. But those little small things make a big difference when you're competing at such a high level, and that continuity over time is big. So I agree with you on that. So last question for you, get you out of here on this. So Alabama's taken over the rivals teams rankings. They're top rated, number one. They got some teams hot on their trail. Do you think Bama holds on to the number one ranking, and which team might challenge them for that top spot come early signing period, National Signing Day?
It's interesting, right? Because the way the classes have unfolded has been a little different this year. Our rankings have fluctuated quite a bit, just based on really who stocked up early, and Alabama made this huge run basically between the sort of the end of July through now, and jumped into first place and have a pretty strong position at this point. Everyone's sort of at that 20, between 18 and 20 of the major players. Who could challenge them? You always look at Ohio State, you look at Clemson, you look at Georgia. What is Texas doing? That's a sort of an X factor in all of this too. They're sitting there at 4 right now. Those are sort of the teams I kind of look at. Florida seems to be starting to pick up some momentum as well. But to me, I think the strength of Alabama's class, and really even some guys that are probably going to move up in the rankings as the rankings kind of progress as we get out on the road and see these kids and guys like yourself go and do more in-person evaluations and guys maybe you didn't get to see in camps. Those things will help some of these Alabama commits move up in the rankings, and I think that will further entrench them at the one. I think if they can get Keon Keeley on board and get him signed, I think that's sort of the missing piece in that high-end recruiting thing, to have a couple of guys there. Then you'll have him and Downs, who's going to be a 5-star in my opinion, and then Justice. And so that's where I think the strength will come from, and would be the thing that would keep them at number one. And honestly, if you're going to sign, if they do go to like 27 or 28, that gives them some wiggle room too, because you're going to push out those lower ranked kids. The one thing that people always forget with our rankings is, and I think probably everyone else's, it's based on the number of 20, right? So like it's those top 20 commits. So the better those guys are, they'll end up probably with 20 of their commits being in the rivals top 200 before it's all said and done. So if you're at that, it's pretty hard to not be 1-2. So I feel pretty confident they'll hold on to it, but obviously you don't know. In the age of NIL, anything's possible. So we've seen a lot of mysterious things happen in this last cycle, and then even already through 8 months of 2023.
Yeah, I agree with you fully on everything that you said. It's going to be really hard to move Alabama off of that position, especially if some of these 5 stars, guys that are 4 stars, become 5 stars. But it will be interesting how Ohio State finishes. Texas, they had a top 5 recruiting class last year. They're number 4 right now. LSU also has come on strong. We'll see if they can pick some guys out of Texas, and they recruit nationally as well. So that's going to be interesting where Clemson's at. They're within striking distance. Oklahoma's doing well. You mentioned Florida. The one in Tennessee is coming really hard for some 5 stars as well. So they have an opportunity to finish strong. And I'm not saying supplant Alabama, but certainly make all of the recruiting team races very interesting. The one team we didn't mention, Texas A&M. It was just an amazing class last year. And that's the team I think most of us are really watching, kind of waiting to see what happens and where they end up and how they may influence not only their own class, but those other around them, if they are able to flip some guys or just land a solid class off the guys that are available. But
yeah, A&M was the one that kind of drew obviously the ire of Coach Saban earlier this year, and you know, my question sort of the sustainability of that model, if that's what's going on, and they're trying to bring kids in and using NIL to build a class, however they're doing it, whether it's right or wrong. It certainly seems like that's a big part of their recruiting pitch. And how sustainable is that over multiple classes? That's the other thing that I've kind of wondered about in all of this too. Like, I think at some point there's got to be a little bit of a cooling out because you're getting too fixated on that.
Well, Kelly, I appreciate your time today. We'll wrap it up on that, and we'll have to come back and talk some more Alabama football again here soon.
Thanks, Ryan.